Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're gonna be reviewing Masque by the band Kansas.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
Masque, of course, is not the mask you put on your face, but it's actually written like this, and it basically means masquerade. But anyway, here are some of my favorite bits from this album. So for the longest time I was under the false impression that this album actually was Kansas's second album. Of course their debut is the self-titled one, and then I thought that this one came and only then did Song for America and Leftoverture came. But apparently I was wrong. And the reason for thinking that is kinda stupid, because I knew the album cover for this one, and when I saw that it didn't have the signature Kansas logo, I just assumed that, it probably came, before they made this logo back in Song for America, but apparently I was wrong. I'm just herder stupid sometimes. This album actually comes in between Song for America and Leftoverture. Now, coming between two of what might be their best works ever, how is this album? It's of course supposed to be, pretty freaking great. Well, we'll talk about it. Well, much like the cover is some sort of anomaly in the covers of Kansas, so is this album, and it really goes quite far from the preconceived goods that Kansas have been known to make up until that point. And overall, if I had to describe this album, I'd have to say that the most striking thing about it is it being very, very radio friendly on most of its songs. And my reasoning for why they did it is, well, as you might see, this album and Song for America both came out in 1975. And my personal opinion is that they wanted to really experiment with one album, so they did so with Song for America, but when it came time to actually make something that would sell more copies, they also created this album in the same year to compensate for that. And if they only knew in hindsight that they didn't have to create something radio friendly and that they could have just continued doing what they do and give us more of that brilliant Kansas music, and it would garner a lot of sales, but of course they didn't know that, and you have to make ends meet somehow. But despite the music on here being very radio friendly, I will give it some credit and say that it's very Kansas in its essence. I just really love the energies on here. They really have a genuine longing to create their music, and they're all very over the top performance wise. And each of the contemporary tracks does have a lot of potential in it. It's all pretty much contemporary rock music, but they still kind of flirt with progressive. But then you have what are probably the saving graces for this album, being the longer epics that are more progressive and obviously my favorites. So of course you have songs like All the World and the closing piece The Pinnacle, and my personal favorite being Icarus, Born on Wings of Steel. Now I have an honest admission, I actually know Icarus Born on the Wings of Steel beforehand, but the version I know is not the one from this album. I actually know the version from their live album, their first live album called Two for the Show, and in my personal opinion that version in the live album is way way better than the version found on this album. Something about it just having a faster tempo and more energies that you can only find in a live show really make it all the more greater and really fits the song quite well. And honestly, that track on that live album is a 10 out of 10 for me, while the performance given on this album is about an 8. And one thing that really surprised me about this album is just how varied the Kansas sound can really get. Much like Song for America, which we've reviewed on this channel, there are a lot of songs on here which, if you hadn't told me, I would have thought that they were not made by Kansas. They're just so different in so many ways. They're so, verging towards other sides of music in the realm of music as a whole that it's really quite impressive. And honestly, the voice of Steve Walsh is like the only thing that really drives home the point that this is actually still Kansas. But the thing is, he doesn't even do the vocals on all the tracks on here. And honestly, with songs that really don't feel like they were made by Kansas itself, I really needed those songs like Icarus to prove me that this is actually Kansas and not someone hijacking them and making something different out of it. Of course, I'm just joking. But to all of you conspiracy theorists, Kansas might have been hijacked. I don't know. I'm gonna check it out. And despite not being a perfect album in any way, shape, or form, I do feel that this album really deserves the respect of each and every one of their members on here, because everyone is doing such a fantastic job, and it's only the fact that this album was chosen to be as contemporary as it is that it is not as highly regarded as I want it to be. So of course you've got Steve Walsh on most of the vocals. He is really out there, he's in his prime, and I think he's really like unmatched by many singers back in the day. Rich Williams on his guitar is basically carrying a lot of the tracks on here. Like, he's not that prominent all the time because, as you might know, Kansas might not be the band to be most known for its amazing guitar solos. They have a lot of soloists on here, but Rich is just doing so greatly on each and every song, one after the other. Kerry Livern on the Moog on here is just brilliant, just absolutely brilliant. I didn't really hear anyone doing such a great job on a Moog ever. I love some types of synthesizers, but I've never listened to anyone do such justice to the Moog. Robbie Steinhardt, while not delivering the same strong vocals as Walsh, really does an amazing job with the violin on here. I am so sad that he doesn't appear on more tracks prominently, but when he does, he just changes the game entirely, mostly on Icarus. Dave Hope in his bass is basically the glue of this album. Without his playing, this album would just completely fall apart. And of course, lastly, Phil Hurt on the drums. He is so good on here, and I think the thing I really love about how he plays on here is the fact that he just doesn't go for heaviness for no reason. He always plays the right thing for the right section of the song, and if it has to be quieter, if it has to be mellower, if it has to be more in the background, he does it. And when he has to unleash his heaviness, he just does it so freaking well. And Erlon Price has a saxophone solo on the first track, I guess. So yeah, this album does a lot of things right, and despite not being as progressive as I might wanted it to, it is such a pleasure to see that it wasn't a mark in a change of pace for the band, and they actually continued making progressive music as they went along, of course with their next year's album Left Overture, which to me at least seems to be their best work as of now. This album cover is pretty heinous in my opinion, and I don't just mean the decaying sea creature figure that is on it, I just mean everything about it. Like, where do you even start? I guess I'm gonna start with the logo. So you're telling me that by this point the band has already had their amazing logo, which they would continue to use up until today in their albums, and yet they chose to use this really odd basic yellow font which is oddly stretched on top? Like, why would you do that? And talking about bad text, do you know what the name of this album is? Because if I did not know it beforehand, I wouldn't be able to discern it from looking at this cover. It's in the worst possible position. You can probably put the name of this album in the bottom left corner. Why would you do that? And of course, using this script even makes it less readable. And the framing of this album, like, what the fuck is wrong with that? Like, honestly, they put this red box over everything like it's gonna tie everything together in a very harmonious manner, but it just doesn't, and it really looks kind of weird. It really doesn't, do any good for this cover. But the thing is that's really striking is that white lined rectangle, like, going around the image of the weird sea creature decaying stuff, what the fuck that is. You know, whenever you put an image into Word and then you click on it and you've got this rectangle going like above it, and if you don't unclick it just stays there. Well, it looks like someone did that, it just forgot to unclick. I know Microsoft Word wasn't invented back in 1979, but heck, it looks like that. And lastly, we have to talk about the figure itself. If you ever wanted to deter people from buying your album, I'd say that this figure is a great place to start. For all of you smokers or non-smokers out there, do you know like that really ugly shade of brown that there is on the packages of cigarettes, the one that's supposed to deter you from it? Well, the shade of brown that this figure has is basically the uglier cousin for that shade of brown. Just everything about it is so hideous, and that's really odd because I would reason that the reason they made this album in the first place is to try and get it to sell better because it is less experimental, but this cover just, you know, throws everything down the bin. Nothing about it looks good. I see no reason why people in the record shop would take this one and be like, you know what, this looks appealing, I'm gonna buy this. And it's not like Kansas are such a known band by this point. They're like, you know, not a household name at all. Like, honestly, what were they thinking to themselves? This album, it gets a rating of 6 out of 10. You know, everyone makes mistakes. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to Fall by the band Freedom to Glide. I of course want to thank my lovely supporter over on Patreon, so thank you so much to Clay Walnum. You are the best, and if any of you want to support me over on Patreon, you can find the link down in the description or in my about page. But that's about it, guys. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.